Esports podcast, noun. A 2-hour-long video full of banter and nonsense where the guests are only introduced halfway through and the outro makes you think your internet's died. Huh.
This is going to be episode 18 of Watch the Overture. See, unfortunately, Yiska, when I did that there, I actually for like a second allowed myself to be self-conscious, so I didn't say like, right, this is episode, which is what I always do, right? And so the problem is, in not doing that, because it was so artificial to not do that, now I've thrown myself completely off. Now it feels wrong and weird, you know, as opposed to just saying the same thing every time. But then again, I have always said to people, it is like a mad first world problem to be like, why does that guy always start his sentences with similar words in the thousands of hours of content I've listened to? It's like, be reasonable, please. Be fucking reasonable. Like, so anyway, on this episode, we have got another guest, which means actually that we didn't get turned down by people. Just it's dark secret, Yiska, but a little peek behind the curtain for anyone who follows the show there. So our guest for this one is obviously Uber. Comes from Australia. That shouldn't really be part of his identity, but whatever. I noticed the Aussies do love to play that up, you know. They love, like, here's the thing I know about Australians, right? That people who watch the Overwatch League won't know Uber because Americans love to treat people. They like fetishize where you come from, right? So, for example, if you come from Britain, they want you to speak in the Mary Poppins voice and be like, "Go bribe me, Mary Poppins, me get it in your fucking gullet." Like, they want you to make ridiculous comments. And you know what I learned? And I did this before. If you go to America and you do play it up like that, they fucking love it. They eat it up. They're loving that shit. Do you ever do that? Do you ever, like, you know, just go extra Oz?
If you don't think I'm milking that like the fattest cow you've ever seen, then you're out of your mind. I haven't quite got to the point where they'll carry streets, but I'm trying to work on it. Like, you want to be a real, you want to be a curio, I think, in a country that is relatively homogenized, like for the amount of people.
Sure.
And if I get an easy way to stand out, i.e. like where I was born, then yeah, I'm gonna hammer it home, of course.
Sure.
It's sort of a problem as a German. If you start talking German English, you can sort of get the police or the FBI called on you. So
yeah, sure. See, it conquered your country like that as well. Went there, was all Australian. It was easy going until you get to a bank and they won't speak English to you even if they know it. Like, you have to have a translator, and that screwed me over pretty bad. But indeed. Good country though. Do rate it.
Right, so the concept for this episode, as usual, we'll start with like a vague concept and we'll see where it goes. The concept for this one is going to be that it's actually kind of like a nuanced part that'll be behind the scenes for most people, which is when casters cast games, fans don't ever have to think about these sorts of things. You know, it's like if I watch a Hollywood movie, I don't start thinking about like the fucking blocking of the camera angle and, what was the lighting like there? The idea is I have suspension of disbelief. I let myself go in the movie, you know. So what people don't know about casting is you don't literally just say what you're seeing and then get lucky and then cool shit happens. What you have to learn is things like, right, is what I'm seeing now about to become something exciting? So should I start building towards that? Should I start paving the way there? Like, I'll give you an example. In CSGO, obviously the most epic and iconic voice is Anders because of all like the, are you kidding me? And all that sort of shit. And he even says he actually came up with a philosophy for how to do that, which was eventually what he would do was, he wouldn't go for it every time, but if he had like the spider sense of like this could happen, he would basically from the first kill start ramping towards that. And then if, obviously if it like failed after the second kill, he'd have to I'd say like deregulate down a level and then just go back to normal. But the reason he said you had to do that was even if you're going to look stupid sometimes, the problem is it looks worse to already be on like the third kill and then go like, oh shit, I have to hype it now, it's going to be amazing. Oh no, what are you doing? Like he said, he actually, believe it or not, even though it sounds fake when you do it and it fails, because people will forget that and remember the really good one, because that's going to be the clip, isn't it? It's going to be the one time it works. He said that when it really works, you want it to be as though like it was the perfect moment. And so what he's essentially admitting there, guys, which is what we're going to talk about, I'm sure, is it's not that it's fake, but there's a logic to it. Like there's a technique that has to be done in this. So the question I have is this. I know from games, like, so my old mate Alchemist, who used to work in production on the Overwatch League, I know that he has to think about these things as well. Like, what is going to be a great moment? What camera angle should I have when something looks like it's going to go sick, Like, for example, I know in season 1 of the Overwatch League, one of the great reasons we all worship Jonak is he even said, even though normally they were telling me, don't go on the fucking Zenyatta, like, all it does is just, like, defend or whatever. He said, I was just, like, breaking that, because every time I saw Jonak start to pop off, I was like, obviously this is what you got to see now. So the point here is, yeah, you've got to, like, there's a mentality behind how to do this. So being as in other games, when I talked to Alchemist, like he said, for example, in CS, it was a lot easier, you can sort of see something building up. In games like League of Legends, you see, obviously, they use the downtime of the laning phase, and then when it goes to the team fight, you go hype, right? In Overwatch, the number one criticism of the game, Uber, is it's really hard to follow. Everything's happening at once, and it's very nuanced. I mean, forget in the past, with GOATs especially, the level of, layering of things going on. So let's start out with this topic. In Overwatch, as someone who's casted a bunch of different games, how did you approach that angle? What makes a moment in Overwatch? Or how do you kind of, build up hype? Because again, as an aside, every rookie caster just hypes all the time, and then they have to learn to sort of not do it all the time to make it mean something. So where would you start us on this topic, mate?
Well, I actually brought some slightly unique experience into casting Overwatch because I was a dog shit CS and LoL caster before that. So I already had
you did everything wrong in those games.
Yeah, didn't quite go the way I wanted to. So I had a decent background to work from, right? So obviously in League of Legends, you're right, casters don't hype up the laning phase, except for this one. I love First Blood, bro. I was all about them level 3 all in. I was just, jerking off. So one of my biggest feedback from casting IEM Katowice doing League of Legends was just too hype, too much energy. I realized later on that I just couldn't help it, to be honest. But Counter-Strike was similar because you really have to bring it down each round. So you're up and down like this, whereas League is sort of like that. Whereas I wanted to be more up than down if I could help it. So in Counter-Strike, there'd be rounds where I'd want to try and carry the excitement of the previous round through, but that round was a gun round. The next round they're on an eco, sure. So it's you cannot maintain that. You need to bring it down quite quickly, which for me is quite exhausting. And I also cast a bunch of Battlefield 4, which was also more of a respawn-based game type, a bit more.
That's probably a good game for that style, though, right? I mean, isn't that constant action sort of?
Yeah, that was what helped me a fair bit because it was fairly. Basically, we gutted Battlefield 4, everything good about Battlefield 4, we just took out of the game to make it balanced for esports. So no aircraft, no tanks, no nothing. It was 4v4 squad rush. You could res each other, but it was basically just it was just like Call of Duty Hardpoint. Basically, that's what it ended up being like. But at least that the way the game type sort of moved along. This is the stuff that me and Machine would be stuck in the tiny studio on a Tuesday night at 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. casting. This is where we sort of got started. So
I'm sure it gives you room to experiment though, right?
Absolutely. I mean, until Joe Miller sits down with you at VOD the next day and brings up the very clip that you're hoping that he wouldn't refer to. It's why are you guys talking about dicks here? Or something like that. Then you kind of get... You can't get messed up. Jason Kaplan was a huge culprit of this. Me and him used to go off the rails awfully in Battlefield. But when I came to Overwatch, I guess to answer the question, we had no kill feed.
Yes.
We did have ultimate indicators, but we had it was also no hero limit.
Holy shit, I've just remembered that. Dude, you know how you forget things early on in games?
Yeah.
Because you just take for granted what you have now.
Yeah.
I can't even believe that. That must have made trying to cast a team fight in Overwatch doing a fucking live action Where's Waldo. You don't even know who's killing anyone. So holy shit.
Think, here's a great way of putting it. Think Lijiang Tower, right, the night market level, which was around back at the time.
Sure.
Think 10 traces, all with different skins, and they're not coloured by team. They were able to use
I forgot there wasn't one hero limit. Yes. Oh my god, this is a nightmare.
And 2 Lucios, and no kill feed.
This sounds like Monte Cristo just wakes up in a fevered sweat, it's over. Oh, that was years ago. That
motherfucker's lucky. He never had to cast that. I mean, Monty was still doing League of Legends at the time. So I'm sat here with this absolute shit sandwich of a team fight, and we just had to learn to try and make sense of those. And I don't necessarily think we ever did a great job of that. But eventually, when things got better, so we dropped one hero limit. No hero limit. Sorry, we got skins. We had observers. At least because me and Jason had to observe that ourselves, obviously in the studio. So there was a lot of stuff going on. So it was just awful for the first 4 months until we actually got good at that level of difficulty, and then obviously it got easier because of these additions that were made to the game. But yeah, I think for us, we knew generally that there was always going to be a fight. It always depended on meta though. So the flow of the game in Overwatch is tied to the meta, always. So in a dive meta, there would be a fight each time, regardless. And DPS players would use their ultimates of their own volition. and not necessarily to combo. A good example of a team who was great at this was Rogue, just why they sucked in later metas, because they, like, Nico just pull out the fucking Dragon Blade and try and kill 4 people, like, whenever he could. You know, like sooner just try and drop a pulse bomb in, like, they would just be playing in this aggressive way.
If you come from League of Legends or any game like that and you know the concept of how team fights work in that game, I'm not joking. Obviously, I'm not an expert about Overwatch, but when I was watching that first year of Overwatch, I used to literally say to Monty, like, why the fuck are they, like, having fights when the ult's down? Like, what is this shit? Like, do they not even understand the concept? Like, or they do the thing where, you know, like, you burn your ults first and then they just re-engage onto you. It's like, again, like, that you're not going to win like that. And what was mad was he was just saying, like, yeah, the players just have a different view on that, mate. You just can't get through to them. They, you know, like, they have to figure out for themselves why it doesn't work.
Yeah, there's no bushes for him to hide in Overwatch, you know.
There was even a time in Overwatch where there was still this scrubby comeback mechanic where people charged ultimate based on receiving damage, which was hilarious.
Oh my god, yes.
And completely destroyed.
Oh, dude! You know what's mad? That is actually what made me actually think Overwatch was a fun game when I first played it. Because, I mean, listen, I'm just going to immediately admit something quite embarrassing, which is when I first played the game, I actually legitimately enjoyed just playing Zarya all the time. And obviously, I was thinking, this is fucking awesome. I have the ult all the time because everyone's just shooting the fuck out of me. Weren't they? Like, the Tracer would shoot me all the time. It's like, this is good. Even if I die, I'm back in the game. This is fun. It's like, that's all you need to know, Yiska. I was a noob and I was thinking it was great and I was getting my ult all the time. That's a nightmare if you're a good player. Like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah. Well, ults charged faster back then as well. Like,
sure,
they nerfed the rate of ult charge as well.
Oh, don't worry. All I was doing was just spamming that right click all day long, baby, till I got that ult. Like, there was no skill involved.
I mean, like, I was like probably the one good strong part of my league casting was teamfight casting. So I definitely carried that into Overwatch when it came down to the fights themselves, because it wasn't like Battlefield. Like, people weren't like shooting fireballs and you know, creating earthquakes. They were just soldiers, right? So each game that I cast, I definitely took an element of that and tried to combine it, which I think actually gave me a bit of a head start in that game, or at least to getting to grips with it or finding the way that I wanted to cast it. I definitely didn't want to cast it like a fighting game. That didn't really occur to me as like a way to do it, but it does work, obviously. But yeah, so we like the way the game used to be, like, teams, the most common strategy was two Zenyatas, 2 Genjis, and 2 Winstons. That was very common. So, like, you'd have Genjis with Harmony Orbs that never really went off them, because the change of Harmony Orb disappearing from line of sight only came in later on. So that was just like pretty mental, like with 2 Genjis on each side, constantly just trying to mess each other. Winstons were just trying to kill the Zens and stuff. Like, the Zens just kept getting like popped. That was kind of the point of the composition. But you know, for example, in Goats is a good example of a meta where, like, things build up to a head a lot more. So it's a little bit easier to, like, track a trajectory towards what will definitely be a team fight. The problem is that there are a couple moments, like, there are only 1 or 2 swing moments that occur in these team fights. It's not as if, like, you have a Widowmaker getting a 3K and changing the landscape of a team fight on her own. In Overwatch, it's like, did you knock the Rhine shield out of the way to get the self-destruct?
Yeah.
Did your half your team get bubbled, and are they like Winston bubble is actually mad important right now, because it, like, stop people from getting transcendence healing by being in your bubble or sound barrier, like, you just wreck them. You know, but so it's a little bit easier to build up to those fights, which is actually why me and Matt made a really concerted effort to just not. We actually don't play by play about 40% of the fights in Ghosts, because
there'll be no time to talk about the other shit then.
Yeah, and there isn't going to be a result yielded, and you need to discuss like some of the interactions. In Dive Comp, like, Dive was like Seeker's meta for play casters, because you just be out there just, you know, tweaking yourself, just like yelling about all the Widowmakers, like, you know, killing people or Genjis or whatever. But it was, and like, Johnny actually made a tweet last night, reinforced, saying that he definitely doesn't think that Goats is, you know, I think ZP tried to tweet something very patriotic about Goats being like an evolution of Overwatch's meta and plays. And Johnny's like, I don't agree with that. Like, I remember he had to be the Winston for wins, you know, to get Zarya charge off for back in the day. And like, you know, his belief was that it was much more complex, especially the idea of counter diving back in the day of Dive was like really, really important, and there's a lot of precision involved. So, you know, when we came into the game, like, I don't think me and Jason Kaplan was the ones who were casting it. We didn't really have a real idea of like where we wanted to go, but he had a League of Legends and CS background as well. So we essentially we went into like very solid play-by-play and color roles to begin with. And then we just had to sort of evolve and contend with the meta as it changed. You know, went from that ridiculousness it went to 2-2-2 for a while, actually, at the start of the game. That was quite fun. And then players started getting creative, and we got things like Beyblade and Dive and stuff like that after.
Sure. Well, the funny thing that you mentioned there that made me think is that is one of the things I found interesting about Overwatch is that obviously it is a tricky game to cast, and really none of the other formulas that people used perfectly fit. Everyone's having to adapt. But what made the game interesting to me when Overwatch League started is all the talent coming in, except like, you know, Hexagrams, Mr. X, even Mr. X, I guess, came from Call of Duty. So most of them, except like Hexagrams and CP, basically, weren't from Overwatch, like, or TF2 or a similar game. So as a result, everyone coming in did initially try to apply their pattern. Like, one of the funny things is, when Semmler first came, well, obviously it was like prime in the middle of Dive, when Semmler first came over, well, the actual criticism he was getting in CSGO at the time was like, he just tries to hype everything, he just tries to make everything. Well, obviously that was like, I was like, you're going to fucking enjoy Overwatch, like, if you haven't watched it much recently, mate. Like, it's basically your dream. Like, you just the whole time, all your catchphrases, you know, the Semmler bingo of like, it's so sick. Oh my God, like, he still holds on, but they're cutting him to shreds. Like, all the things that we all know and love, by the way. Like, I've got to say, someone, please, I want esports to get to the level where I can buy the Semmler action figure with the buttons on the back that makes those fucking sounds. Like, that would be so sick. But anyway, so Semmler was like that. And I actually thought, by the way, I'll just say this straight up, In season 1, I actually thought there were times where Monty and Dor, considering that, you know, they were the premier casters, they were the builders, the big names, they took a while to adapt. Because, for example, if you don't know, one of the things they were legendary for in Korea was since they had a very hardcore audience of viewers on the English stream, it wasn't like, you know, the casuals watching, they used to actually like skip a lot of the like minor details to banter or to talk about like in-depth strategy stuff. And so I noticed, like, even though Dor can be a brilliant play-by-play if he wants to be, you know, sometimes he'd be trying to like get a joke in there, but it's like, mate, when Dive's happening over and over and over again, like, there's no time for that. Like, you can't get the joke off. Like, you're trying to do something. And obviously Monty was trying to analyze the game, which again, it's going to be very hard if there's action. So you have seen certainly how it's not like, what's good is as the meta's changed, everyone's strengths have a chance to shine and everyone has to adapt. So it's quite interesting to me because no one has the perfect style, I think, for that game.
Yep. And I think the way the game is played changes so drastically between metas that like the casting has to follow suit.
Yeah, it also feels to me very much like sometimes metas, especially like towards the beginning of a stage where play-by-plays aren't as familiar with how everything is played, that the color almost needs to like signal, okay, something's happening here, right? So for instance, the one moment that I guess it's the most recent one, you know, the Fran boost thing on Hollywood, right?
Yep.
Like that moment or the casting, I mean, it is Monty and Doa sort of like there are certain mechanisms, but the hype line was actually delivered by Monty, right? So I also wonder if now how rigid really in Overwatch, you know, the concepts of play-by-play and color can necessarily be.
Well, not very rigid, I'll be honest with you. I think also, like, in my personal opinion, and very humble as it is, Monty often delivers the hype lines in a lot of his commentary with Doa, and he will shift into that play-by-play region and develop, like, give you that very quick soundbite that you sort of need to have. Doa usually likes to let things lay out a bit, and like he'll elongate his delivery somewhat. So if it needs to be urgent, then he's not your caster for it. Doa definitely shines in downtime primarily. Sure. That was where his biggest strength was. But when Monty cuts across, like I guess the candor of his delivery is really important to jolt you awake. So I often see him stepping into the play-by-play role as well. And I haven't really asked him about that. That's just an observation. But me and Matthew think about the same thing as well. And you know, I think about the old Anders and Semmler duo, which while there was a lot of overlap between play-by-play and color for those two. And that
we always used to joke basically that like Anders was basically like 75% play-by-play, 25%, you know, like analysis, and it was like a similar but maybe the opposite one for Semmler. But eventually, as they both did enough events and like got insane synergy, eventually they just both did their own thing, but very similar. But you know, somehow dodged around each other, stepped on each other's feet. You know.
Yep. And like I get up and coming casters messaging me like, oh, you and Matt, what's your exact proportion of play-by-play color, like, I'm like, yeah, I have to think about it, which I rarely do. But initially, Matt was in the duo just to be very much a support caster, and not that I would right over the top of him, but he had a couple months. He still had to catch up with just the metagame and analysis. So I was doing like a lot initially. And as the sort of years went on, like I'd step back, and now like he's just comfortable enough. He'll jump into play-by-play. It also happens when you throw to someone, right? Because Overwatch, sometimes the flow of team fights is not like super predictable, and if teams are disengaging and stuff like that, and I use Matt a lot. Like I will just straight up ask him questions for the audience's benefit.
Do you have to do the old like, never mind that man, they're going in like?
Yeah, like I've had a couple times where it's that. But if I throw Matt the ball and there's a team fight happening, he will just be able to take it and then drop me in after the first.
That's basically. By the way, I can actually give you some insight on the Anders Assemble one, because that's a great point to make, by the way, because you're right. If you had a caster who didn't know what I just told you there about how they eventually sort of like learned that, listen, we're both just going to do it actually, like we're going to do it when it makes sense. A caster would tell you that they are the most blueprint example of a play-by-play and then a colour guy, right? Whereas obviously, like I said, by the end, they weren't at all. Like if anything, people at the end used to complain they didn't have the analysis just because none of them were pros, Well, here's an interesting detail. I know that actually all they used to do, because they were both really good at similar things and they didn't want to step on each other's feet, they used to literally in Counter-Strike just use that basic formula of like, this is my round, your round's next, my round's after. They used to just do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't notice it when you were watching though, it would seem seamless.
Yep. Me and Pansy cast, we'd swap rounds or we'd do color and play-by-play analysis. She was obviously like, GE and very knowledgeable about the game. I was fucking garbage. So she had a chance at least there to like flex some of her like, understanding of the game. Not that it ever fucking made a difference.
By the way, just double check the like gain on or the gate or whatever on the mic, because it doesn't happen often, but sometimes it cuts like one word out or something.
Right, yeah, I'll... It's
sometimes like if you lean into it too much, because I noticed that happens with Monty's, because yours like his is that the sound quality is mega, but just every now and then it'll just drop like half a word or something. I haven't missed anything like in the floor so far, but I just thought I'd tell you now just in case you can fix it.
All right, that's fine. Worst case, I'll go push the talk and we'll just keep going. But I just turned the game down a bit.
Sounds fine.
Yeah, so that's the way it sort of began, I suppose. I don't think it's a... There are a lot of different casting duos in the Overwatch League now as well, and they do things that I will agree and disagree with, like respectively, right? I just realized that with Matt, it was probably better also to add a third element outside of analysis and play-by-play, and that was discussion. We go for a lot of back and forth over the course of a game, which doesn't necessarily fall within either of those points. Sure. And I will do the classic play-by-play trick of asking a question I might already know the answer to.
Yes.
And I do that a lot with him, just because like I really try and put myself in a position of a viewer who's maybe just not seen a whole lot or whatever. Like, mate, the reason like there's not 20 threads about me on Reddit like there was last year is because I can't pander to that crowd anymore. And I'm cool with Reddit, but I have to, like, our bosses are telling us, like literally our bosses are telling us, you guys, you have a really wide audience now. We have to shift that threshold of assumed knowledge down a couple of notches.
It can't be too hardcore.
Yeah. So I'm like, that's fine, but also that's also why everyone's like, man, those contenders casters. I wish we had them in Overwatch League. And I'm like, you know what's going to happen when they get in the Overwatch League? They have to do the same thing that we have to do. And you guys are going to feel disenfranchised to be like, oh, man, Mitch is really off his game this year. Like, yeah, of course, because I'm not, giving you what you want. So I'm sorry. That's the way it goes. But so we try and go for a lot of discussion and a lot of our broadcasts, me and Matt, to recover the downtimes, but also it equally covers the team fights that, let's just say, are not like super impactful or are just teams blowing off steam or trying to like, if it's an eco fight or they're trying to, gain 0%, then like Matt knows that he has the freedom to not throw back to me and just like, and if it looks like it's a fight, then he can chuck it back. Like we're just flexible. So,
yeah. Well, I noticed actually, like as you said there, where if it's like a part of the GOAT setup where it's like this isn't actually going to be like a full-blown like fight where one person wipes the other team, basically what you've figured out there is what people had to figure out in Counter-Strike, which is like you can't cast all the equal rounds. Like, those have to be where the collar guy has a chance to talk, otherwise he's never gonna have the freeze time, which is 15 seconds. Like, it's a bit unreasonable to go. They used to do that to me, dude, back in the day. I'll just say it right now, he won't be mad because this was from old school shit. back in the day, so like 9 years ago, I actually used to do the IEM circuit in Counter-Strike with Joe Miller. And obviously he was like the ultimate play-by-play guy of all time, you know. And he would even, you know, he would even want that to be the strict sort of like distinction between the two of you. And so unfortunately though, he would actually sometimes do that. Like he would sort of be like, right, so what happened in that round then? And it's like, it's like, I've got like 10 seconds here to just fucking like, because, you know, I know if like anyone starts firing a gun, like probably he's so good at casting as well. Like he can just, he's one of those guys where he really, like the other guy could just leave and he could just cast for like 9 hours without taking a break, you know, like he really could do that. So unfortunately you did have to just like go, the economy, and like you're just jabbing it all in 10 seconds. Oh. And then, by the way, because this is earlier in esports, that when we would skip the eco round, there would be fans complaining like, why is he talking over the kills? It's like, give me a break, please give me a break.
Well, it's the same in Overwatch now. Like casters are getting slammed for not being hype enough, like not yelling enough. But I'm like, every single play-by-play caster we have like is generally high energy. You know what I mean? But like if you're not literally like tearing out your vocal cords, then like you're not, you know, like you're not getting a love from people, which kind of blows my mind as well, because it's such a trap. It's such a trap if you're especially if you're an amateur caster and you're getting into it and you look at this shit on Reddit and you think that's what people want. Like it is like a long road to ruin. Like you do not want to do that. I mean, I was taught by Joe Miller. Like so, like I got a lot of one-on-one like VOD review out of him as well, and I think he definitely ingrained in me like this play-by-play, like everything sort of idea. Like, and Lee Smith was the same, right? Being in that room with D-Man and Joe Miller, like you're being taught by like the old school of like play-by-play casters. Which, by the way, I'll just say this right now: that environment, like, not many people will obviously like know what it was like being in an ESL as a caster, but that will never exist again. No. You will never get paid a full-time salary to fucking go to work, cast a couple games a week, and then the rest of the time sit in the office or get a VOD review like from these guys. It was actually the sickest thing. No caster will ever have that opportunity ever again. Ever.
No, I remember some of the events, like if we did them out of the Cologne office, like right after the cast, people were just going off and playing like StarCraft 2 for 8 hours. I was like, what the fuck? They were like, and what was mad was they were like, well, I'm obliged to be at work. It's like, that is such a weird concept. You have to be there, but you can just play games when you're there. Like, it sounds pretty sick, I can't lie.
It's like they didn't have anything for us to do outside of our casts and our VOD review, right? And so like we eventually, like Joe was like, you know, Joe was getting on. He was getting a bit grumpy in the later years of being there without, like, literally like Machine would walk in at 2 p.m., turn his music up really loud. Todd's in the corner like, shut the fuck up and try to play StarCraft ladder. Like he was like trying to get moved out of that room every other week. Sure. Like we made an absolute ruckus in there. So eventually we were, you know, doing our own VOD review. We're doing our own streaming. They got a streaming room for it's actually insane. Like that environment that I was lucky enough to stumble into as a World of Tanks stage host and just receive this learning. You know what I mean? So it's very hard for me.
I'll give you a story that'll just show you what a weird world that ESL office was. I remember, this is years and years ago, when, you know, we were all on Twitter, but everyone had like, you know, 2K followers or something. Yeah. And so as a result, you'd tweet stuff now that you'd never tweet today, because at the time, the only people who'd see it would be other industry people. You know, there weren't fans on Twitter at the time, basically. And I remember,
wouldn't see it either,
no, exactly. I remember Apollo posted a video. I think it was Apollo. It was either Apollo or Joe Miller. One of them posted a video on Twitter where they just did that classic trick where if someone doesn't know, it's so mean, but you just do it to your mates where you go, what's in the bottom of that? And you keep looking into like a bottle of water. You know this one I'm on about.
He did it with his elbow. Joe did it with his elbow all the time.
Right. So what you do is this Yiska, you pick up like just a normal, like, you know, like an Evian bottle, and you just start looking down like through the hole with the lid off, going, what the fuck is that at the bottom? And what you do, right, is you put it on the table and you get your mate to look in there, and he goes, yeah, what is that? And when he looks in it, you hit either side of the water bottle and the water just shoots in his eye, which is like, it's an arsehole thing to do, but I can't lie. If it's not me that had it done to me, I'd laugh if I was in the room. Like, you just would. Like, that's the sort of thing they were putting on Twitter. So I can't imagine what wasn't going on Twitter.
Oh, well, I mean, it was... Like, and I was there, by the way, in Cologne after the LCS was based in Cologne. So it had just moved to Berlin. So I was told, like, the year before I got there was even more mental. But in when I was there, like, there was absolutely a lot of consumption of alcohol going on, mate. Like, I was out there 4 or 5 nights a week, still holding down a full-time job whilst going out and drinking 4 or 5 nights a week. Like, no one else will ever get that kind of levity, like, as a caster, you know what I mean? Like, it just the Celestial Lottery was won by yours truly there.
Of course.
I will say, though, that does sound probably to listeners to like, oh, yeah, okay, that's super lazy. But I will say, I think that actually helps to some degree to sort of immerse yourself, not just in the community, because you're then also, participating in all kinds of community sites, but you're also playing the game. And to a degree, depending on how good you are, of course, you sort of get an idea where the annoyances are, what feels good, and sort of almost like subconsciously get a feeling for the game. And then I'm not sure if it appeals to a majority of the audience, but definitely those that also spend significant amounts of time in the game itself. And then I think just sharing the suffering or the joy is sort of like the ingredient that it's probably not tangible, but somehow just makes the broadcast
just resonates
authentic.
with the muscle. Yeah.
I think I mean, so we wouldn't have had the time, me and Jason, to produce content for Overwatch. I mean, if we didn't have this kind of environment, this job, right, we're still getting paid to be in that studio. But our early days of like playing Overwatch like a ton and being in there, we were in queues with like Cruz and Vic and Valitaia and stuff like that. And we were able to develop networks with players that even to now really benefit me in a huge degree. When I can just go up and talk to a guy like these players, I understand like a lot of our Overwatch League players are probably less gregarious than you would expect like your Counter-Strike guys to be, or like they are a little bit more reserved in general, not all of them, especially with such a high proportion of them, just not being able to speak English. So whatever connections that I'm able to leverage with pro players on Overwatch now, like, are incredibly important, because I don't play at 4,600. I play at 3,600 on a good season. So I need to know what it feels like to be that brig in that GOATS comp, And when I was in Philadelphia casting their show matches or something like that, I had like a 2-hour conversation with EQO, and I was able from that to glean like what it was like to be in his position. And I'd realized actually that in my prior casting of, triple tank, triple support compositions, I'd been misattributing blame to him when actually it wasn't. Like, so for example, like what we're seeing with Brigitte in a lot of these compositions, especially back when she could still shield bash through Reinhardt's shield, that they would die first all the time. Briggs would die all the time. And what was actually happening was they'd go to shield bash the Rein, and the enemy Zarya would quickly bubble that Reinhardt they're trying to bash. So they shield bash forward, and then they're overextended essentially without a mobility cooldown, and they get killed. And so you see it like when you're seeing it in like a top-down map, you don't actually see that brief interaction. You just see like you see Brig like kind of pushing forward. You don't see you don't hear the stun from Ryan getting stunned because there's a bubble there. So all you see is a Brig out there like this, like swinging and then getting killed. And you're like, oh, EQA's out of position again. But then when I go back and talk to him, I was like, oh my gosh, I've completely been like misattributing, like not only but blame, but also, like those that are doing the right thing here. So, I mean, it's very hard for me as like, and I'll be honest with you, play-by-play cast in the Overwatch League, there is no one that's about where I am. Like, we're all at the best, we're masters.
Yes.
So we don't play pro pugs, obviously.
For anyone who doesn't know, by the way, Monty has even admitted the entire time when he played League of Legends that I think he stopped playing League of Legends in like season 2 in like 2012. Like I think he would occasionally play it if a new champion came up, but he didn't play the game. In that particular case, he used to just put more hours in the VOD review.
Yeah. And for an analyst, I think that's obviously really good as well, because you need a lexicon to draw on, especially when your job is to identify trends or to draw causal links between like events that happen not only just within the same game but across games, across metas, etc. That's really important to do. But I know that Monty hasn't really played much Overwatch since Mercy was overpowered. There's only 6 people. Like every now and then he was getting on and playing a little bit. Like before the talent takedown, like we would play a little bit there, but it's just not really his bag.
Yeah. So here's the thing, by the way, as a random aside, just a little story. There was once, because in Korea, people don't know this. In Korea, esports isn't as big as people think it is in the West. Like, it is a thing, but it's like it's very specifically its own niche. And so, like, it would be like if I said, like, snooker's on in the UK. Like, it is a sport, and some people watch it, but it's not on the main channel, and not everyone's watching it, Like, some people are watching it, but it's, like, niche. And so, one of the main things they actually do in Korea, when they have those, like, channels that are just gaming channels, is the actual esports part is like, it's 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day or something. The rest of the day is like variety shows around games. So for example, they'll have like comedians and like pop singers play a game of League of Legends together, and you'll hear all the comms and stuff, which sounds really bizarre, right? Because you think, fucking hell, why do you want that? But the whole point is, it's like the most casual version of one if you're a League of Legends fan. And so one of those shows actually had Monty come on it, and he played League of Legends. And obviously I was thinking, fucking hell, I hope he doesn't embarrass himself. I hadn't played in years. But what is sick, right? You'll love this, Yiska, is he just came in and he picked like one of the champions that he knew from back before, which is like Leona as a support. And he actually did, because the key thing about Leona is he didn't need any mechanics on it back then. It was like everything was super easy. So all he did was, because he knew he was just playing like he wasn't playing like a high level set of opponents, he just literally roamed around the map, shot calling all these sick ganks and stuff, and he actually looked like a god, because even though clearly he wasn't skilled at the game, he knew like, well, the one thing I have over all these fuckers is I've been watching like years of pro play. So he was just like, he looks like an actual god, mate. He's just like roaming around the map, kill everyone. And the worst part about that obviously is, then initially, because his friend, I was thinking, I hope he doesn't embarrass himself. Then at the end, I was just thinking, this arsehole's now he's going to think he's the fucking shit, isn't he? Look, the one time he's going to do the Bart Simpson thing, like, I retire from playing League of Legends on stream now. Like, what an asshole.
Yeah. What I will say though is the fact that play-by-plays and even also color commentators get stuff wrong, I think should really not keep casters from still applying that criticism.
No, because of course not.
Even if you're wrong, I mean, you're not doing it maliciously. And also the fact there's something. I wonder sometimes just how accurately people actually listen to broadcasts. I think it's almost much more important to have like a solid balance. It's not zero sum, because it's still an entertainment product, and you don't want to have like 50% of the time I shit on someone, and then 50% of the time I want to say he's amazing. There's certainly like a weight towards playing up what is happening, but at the same time, like just applying negative connotations here and there, picking a negative adjective or a noun, saying that play was bad. I think that inherently can build up towards the great moments. And I think generally sports, and I think even esports more, are about these great moments. So it's like, because it's so much about frag movie culture and everything, that it's more important to get the 10-10 and otherwise have the broadcast be a 5 than have a consistent 7.
Here's the thing, I'll give you some insight on that, which is like, first of all, the thing that you said about do people actually listen? Even pros make that mistake all the time. I've noticed, by the way, it's one of those things where whenever I notice something in other people, I try to imagine it as though I'm like fucking in a David Attenborough documentary and I'm just watching the other humans as though they're like a different species. Like, look, the humans are doing this, that. So as a result, right, what I try to do is, rather than be condescending and just think, that person's an idiot, like he didn't even listen to what I said, I try to think to myself, do I ever do that in any scenario? And I do. And what it is this. Since like the current world we live in is we consume all this media, we just sort of scan through it all. Like we can't just focus super duper on every single thing. You sort of like, when something's not that interesting, you half tune out and then you hear something and you tune back in, right? The problem is, most of the time when you have, especially if you're like a pro player or a super hardcore fan, you probably have like a really specific thing that peeves you, like a pet peeve or a trigger, right? And the problem is, you've seen that thing a million times. That's why it's like ingrained in you. But the time that you want to complain, what they said might not actually be the perfect example of what you're really mad at, but it's close enough. And so what you kind of do is in your brain, you conflate all the idiots that said anything vaguely like that, and then you just like attack the guy who said it because you're like, oh, look, he's, so for example, he's just like playing up that meme that like Jake can't play Trace or something like, and it's like maybe what he actually said was like, not a great engagement on Trace. Like you might have said something quite reasonable, but like they sort of take all the other things and build it out of what you just said. So I don't blame people on that. That can definitely happen.
It's a quasi straw man, actually. So like,
it's like there is a grain of truth to it, That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm not blaming the person entirely, but again, if you're the guy who they're doing it to, you are just going to think like, "What the fuck? I didn't say that." Like, I'm not saying that.
But I actually think like these great moments, like the more how do I put this? The more brutally honest that you can actually be as a broadcaster about like perhaps a play not being good, great example is I called the London Spitfire a disgrace when they lost to the Dragons, and I thought that was still justified.
Sure.
But like in 4 months' time, they end up winning the league. There's this incredible moment. Like, that is only the intensity, or that the incredibleness of that moment is only assisted by people being brutally honest about them when they suck. Like, there's no point everyone just being like, 50-50 on good, bad, and they have a good moment. It's like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. Maybe we kind of expected that, But if there's like a team that is literally, like just doo-doo for the first part of the season, and then, have one of these moments, I think the impact of that, especially the people that watch the league, are going to be rewarded even more so by the catharsis of that moment.
Exactly.
Because
it's a callback sort of,
Exactly. So I think, like, the more that we are, the more that we were talking about before, right? The more that we're able to be real about teams, and I think even if your conclusion is wrong, it maybe sometimes we make the wrong decision.
Of course, yeah.
If your heuristic or your approach is still, let's say, academically honest, or the way that you're intellectually honest, the way you develop it, then it's still okay. Like, you're not just trying to pull shit out of your ass. You came to the wrong result, but the framework of your argument was still sound.
Mate, there is actually a call that now is infamous that Henry G did in CSGO. He did it last year because the context was at one of the early tournaments. It was Star Series Season 4 in Ukraine. This was when Simple first was going like absolute god mode. Like, every game he was hard carrying. And at the time, actually, his team, the other guy who's now the star player, Electronic, wasn't that great. Like, they hadn't figured out how to use him in the team. So it was basically literally just the Simple show every game. And what happened was, in the final, his team basically should have won this event. They were one map up, and then on the second map, they were like right near victory. And Simple at the time, by the way, was like dropping 40 kills and just killing everyone. But at the same time, the reason why they hadn't already won the game is because the in-game leader, Zeus, was on 5 kills even when it went to overtime. And so what happens is, in overtime, there's this mad moment where Zeus inexplicably gets like a mad double CZ kill. And so Henry G's call was, he finally does something! And by the way, I'm going to tell you, you can imagine some fans weren't really enjoying that very much. But I even told him, mate, in a mad way, like, obviously that's like sort of an anti-hype call, but it is genius because that will be remembered forever. Like, that's a great call in some ways. Yeah. That is a great call. And again, because the reason I said that is because what it ties into there is, even if Zeus himself would feel, it's a bit harsh, it's like, yeah, but it's authentic. Like, you actually have done fuck all the whole game. Everyone must be thinking it in the back of their head. Wait a minute, Simple's got 40 kills. This guy's got 5 kills. So, like, sometimes if you're a pro player and you're watching this, sometimes you have to kind of take it on the chin there. Like, that is one you have to just own, Yeah. You can't be nice about you all the time. Come on.
It's a great example for why I think that, like, I'm really wary about people hyping up the Chengdu Hunters main tank, Amon, after their last game.
Yes.
I fucking hate it. Like, and I it's so funny because, like, and I'm not shitting on Sideshow here. I love what he does, but I'm going to tell you how I discovered this whole trend.
I like the way everyone's at war. The entire talent, it's just everyone versus Sideshow and some 1vx this season.
I'm usually against Bren. I'm against Parker.
Right, okay.
Like, don't worry.
Okay. Fair enough.
But so I go on Reddit after the game, and there's people losing their minds because Amon didn't get player of the match, right? He had a great performance. They lost, though, in this particular game to the Vancouver Titans. So, like, there was so much hype about it because the Titans were such a strong team. And
of course,
everyone's like, I'm furious that Amon didn't get player of the match. Now, normally we will give player of the match to a player from the winning team because there's a reason for it, but this one was a little bit closer. What people don't know, and now they know, is that the casters actually did choose a player of the match. And we actually chose Jiangheng in this case because especially of what he did in the first 3 maps. Like, the guy's just, he's like a freak of consistency. He's just like eating every diva roll and stuff like that. Like, he made Bacon Jack look like an absolute parrot over that series. But everyone's really upset about this. And I'm like, why?
Is that a saying from Australia, an absolute parrot? I've never heard that one before.
Yeah.
Fair enough, okay.
Plenty of that. But so, and everyone was furious about Amon. And I thought to myself, like, yeah, he did well. Like, his last map on Reinhardt was really good, but they still lost that map. And everyone's gone about on Reddit, and then I go and find the recording of Sideshow stream talking about the last map of that series.
Yes. And is he going furious over the MVP?
Yeah. So and I get in there, and then all of a sudden, like, first of all, everyone's giggling their heads off. Sounds like they've been huffing glue for the last like an hour or so. Like, every time Amon plays, he's like, "Oh, he's a giga chat. He's just huge. He's moving." I'm like, okay. Like, there were some sick shadows. Like, he played really well. But and I'm watching the chat on recording as it go by, right? And everyone is slow. This is slowly snowballing into just some ridiculous hype thing. Like Josh is like, I don't know what time. It's super, super late for him, right? And he's just like giddy. And like, it's a great game, and the Hunters are playing really well. But like, I think Avast is in there, Super's in or whatever. But I saw this, like, I saw it before my eyes, this snowball of like Amon hype just build up. And now then I figured out why everyone went mental, because obviously between Reddit competitive Overwatch and his stream, there's probably a heck of a lot of crossover.
Sure.
So, and like, I was like, okay, that's fair enough, but I'm wary of that stuff, because if you know, like, you want it to be authentic. Like, if that team actually achieves something as a team and then he's a big part of it, you want to be able to pay that off properly, instead of saying, oh, he's been dragging his team kicking and screaming and they finally, you know, won a stage or something like that. Like, it's not going to have the same impact. Like, I don't think that it was intellectually honest to overhype this player so much. And I think it was a result of a bunch of friends sitting in like a Skype call,
having fun.
Yeah, and then all of Reddit's just been like, yes, he's the best, and just running away with it. So I always try and be kind of careful with that as well. You don't want to be, you know, while it's okay to be
too
negative,
hyperbolic or whatever,
exactly. And I think that happens a fair bit. Plus, like when Shanghai won as well, like their first game, like we get carried away on the Overwatch League. We have a lot of fun on the show.
Sure.
But like something, and like me and Monty are very different, I think, as broadcasters. But one thing we definitely agree on is really just trying to keep a standard of intellectual honesty when it comes to to assessing these players. Because otherwise, if everyone's good, no one's good, and vice versa. Like, it'll just turn into an absolute shit show. Like, it will be the WWE. It will have as much. Exactly. It will have just as much, you know, significance as that, which I don't even watch. You know, I'm not really a wrestling guy. So, you know, and there's obviously there's two different camps in the broadcast. There's a lot of guys that really like to, you know, push that, and there's some of us who don't. So, you know, we're working on a balance.
Yes. Well, that's an interesting topic as well, because first of all, like, that was actually a common criticism that people who are Western League of Legends fans who didn't watch the LCK always said about Monty, is they would always claim, like, oh, he's just so biased, you know, like, if it's Koreans, he just says they're all good. That's actually not true. What he would do is, if like it was the bad Koreans, obviously he'd flame them. Now, I will say, he would often flame them by deflecting the dunk onto NA. Like, he'd be like, they're playing like TSM in that last game. You know, he would sometimes do that, which is a bit BM. But I thought it was hilarious, obviously. But I agree with you on that one, by the way, because that is actually probably the big unspoken divide in on-screen talent in esports. This is why it's interesting, Uber, because you would think I would be on the opposite side of this divide, because people think all I do is for like the high entertainment, you know, and banter and stuff, and it's all about having fun. But people don't realize, cause my background is like historian of esports, I care really much if someone's like overhyped, or if they're like accurately level, or even if sometimes you have to be critical of a guy people's a fan favorite. And so, for example, I know that there are plenty of analysts who their philosophy is, well, someone on the desk has to pick the other team, or, you know, someone has to hype the underdog or whatever. And I always used to say to them, like, I see what you mean by that. Like, if it was the WWE, yeah, we would do it that way, because it's all artificial. But I personally think, for example, if the favourite is a heavy favourite, you make actually a more resounding and authentic case if everyone picks the favourite to win and says, actually, I don't see a way in which, you know, the underdog can win. It's kind of a divide, I've noticed. I'd say it's pretty even generally.
Yeah, I think it is. And like I'll be honest, I used to be like a bit sensationalist with my casting, because I was very like idealistic and I was just living the dream, and so that would all sort of filter in, and, you know, it just wouldn't matter who won or lost. You know, I was just getting excited either way. But I remember last year, actually, in the grand final of the Overwatch League, something I said really pissed me off when I went back and looked at it. And it was a good example of me getting carried away, right? The stadium was hyped. There was a bunch of people in there, but there was one player. It wasn't a huge deal. Like, no one's picked up on it. But it's Volskaya Industries between London and Philadelphia, right? And Profit's on Tracer. Now, this is pretty much when they're about to win the game. So it wasn't the play where there's the Dragon Strike. I think it was another one. But Profit's running at the point on attack, Volskaya B, and he gets 5 kills. Well, he gets 5 kill credits, right? But I'm like losing my mind because of just the excitement of the moment and the fact that I'm realizing this is all about to culminate, that I've said verbatim.
One of the best players ever.
Profit's just killed 5 people on his own. That's what I said.
Yeah, I see what you mean, yes.
I'm like, and I look back at the clip and almost flipped my desk over when I realized that I'd said that a couple months later, because he fucking, like, he was not killing everyone on his own. Like, you need more than one clip to kill an Orisa anyway. Yes. Like, why did I even fucking say that? And
I'm sure Gesture was just sat there like, cheers, Uber. Yeah, thanks, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And I realized that it was self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I'd already told myself what I wanted the story to be.
Of course, yeah.
And then that's how I casted it. And it was, and hard to argue with because it was like, we only had the one view at the time, but you can see there were like other people doing damage. He just gets the final blows right. And I realized that that was absolutely intellectually dishonest casting from me because I knew what I wanted. I knew what story that I wanted, and I wasn't actually ready to be reactionary. I was almost, and it's because I got so carried away. I'm like, I got over it and we move on with life. But this is now something that I'm super vigilant about. If I see it in other casters, especially younger casters coming up, you can completely ruin it for a lot of these players as well if you don't do it justice in that way. So
it's also, if you will think back to that moment, and if you look at it now, it is actually, so the one sick thing about that play, I believe, was the pulse bomb. That's the only sick part of it. The first kill on Carpe bots out. Like he gets one clipped and doesn't realize for some reason. Like theoretically, if you now, with the sobriety of the moment, just look at that moment and say, Carpe just completely dropped all the spaghetti. Yeah.
Sato's playing like Orisa on defense there as well, and like against the Tracer, so he's just going to get shit on anyway.
It's a clown moment, but I think like sometimes it is sort of playing with the energy of the moment, certainly, and I think just saying in that moment when someone's about to win the grand final, that in itself was already not that exciting because it was pretty one-sided. You say, "Oh my God, what's Carpe doing there?" Of course, it's probably not what to say in that moment. But what's the point of like not going into WWE? That is a major problem I have with some of the also content creators who, it's like they don't understand that conceptually competition, be it sports, esports, or whatever, is a closed-off system with all the negatives of real life, right? Like you want the system to produce the suffering that then makes the moment better.
Sure.
It is not that you want it to be like a whatever, like a comedy skit where you go in and the suffering of real life is sort of like taken away for 2 hours because you'll laugh your ass off. You want this to be an enclosed system. The people are fans of bad teams and they suffer from it. And
of course, yeah.
Like to be untruthful to that, it's much more. I personally compare it much more to a Colosseum than it ever could be like a concert or whatever. So as like the audience watches the people, like young guys that in that moment of losing a grand final might as well just have like a sword stabbed through them.
Sure.
And there's the gore of it, and there's the tragedy of it, but there's also the exhilarating excellence of the winner, right? And to sort of
you need the guy to die for the other guy to succeed. They can't both have succeeded to some degree. One guy has to literally. That's why like there's the big debate that they always have of like, should you take photos of like the guy who's just lost the the major final or something? It's like the reason you should is because now if that guy wins the major the year after, what that actually means to that guy. Like if he was just distraught, he was distraught. Like that's actually like you're saying, like it kind of is a zero-sum game. Someone has to really lose in order for someone to really win.
Yeah.
I'd love to be nice to the player and go, hey, second place, that was a great. It's like in that moment you have to say you didn't just come second, you just lost the final.
If there are no stakes, then none of this matters.
Yes,
and also if everyone I think a lot of fans want no one to be sad, and a lot of our fans have really idealistic hopes.
People always used to say to me when I did banter, like, can't you just do banter that doesn't offend anyone and is nice to everyone? I was like, if you invent it, just let me know. I'll follow the format if it works. Like, I don't know about you, but in my life, most humor is sort of like, hey, that guy's tripped over. Like, it's not that intellectual, guys. We're not that advanced, I'm afraid,
Yeah, not quite Rick and Morty level of, subtle humor. I think, and look, the more honest you are about these teams, I think, and there's hyperbole on either side, whether you're like going to like shit on people or you're going to be honest about them. Like some of the guys on the desk are guilty of both sides of that sort of thing. Like as long as your argument is actually founded in reality or something that is measurable, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, there is something that drives your argument. You cannot go wrong. But if it's a flight of fancy and it's some tirade that's not based on anything, first of all, you sound like a dickhead. But secondly, it doesn't do anything because it doesn't even like fans of the player don't even understand like what their player needs to do better. Like they don't. Then there's no stakes, and then it just doesn't matter. It's the fucking whose line is it anyway? All of a sudden.
Mm.
Oh, by the way, actually, that reminds me because when you do that style of casting, like the one caveat I should have mentioned, where I think it's okay to do the WWE desk where one person has to be for the underdog or whatever, is if you can actually find a legitimate devil's advocate argument. And even though you might not yourself believe it, like personally, I don't do that. But then again, like it's all well and good for me and Monty to tell people, I'm just going to be myself on the desk. It's like we have sort of like stolen that role. Like everyone can't be the fucking villain arseholes. So to be fair, it is a bit rich of us to just tell like, all the other people, why don't you just do it like we do it? Like, So I will say that is a bit hypocritical. But if the person can, even if they don't fully agree, if they can legit make a real argument, like it's not pure like powder puff, if they really can think of, well, here's like a concept where they could win, I don't mind it then. Because I'll tie this into a concept, right, that you basically alluded to but didn't say overtly, which is also when you're a newer caster and you want to hype the game up, I always tell people it's actually a real thing. One of the reasons I actually really developed trying to do banter and entertainment was to make up for games that didn't warrant really in-depth analysis or didn't have great moments in it. Like it was actually a boring game. Because I realized if you do straight up analysis there, the analysis can't lift the game. The game's the thing that weights it down. Well, similarly, as a caster, because like Yiska said, everyone knows the iconic moments of the great caster. So unfortunately, when you are the new pair of casters in a game, you're getting usually the shitty games. You're getting the ones that are going to be the least exciting. So unfortunately, if you want to have your moment, you might run the risk of forcing it. You might try and overhype a moment or claim something was some epic historical thing. Whereas, like, if you even really sat down, you'd go, actually, that, like you were saying before, Uber, like, you just wanted that to happen. You were waiting for anything you could grasp onto to make that moment, because that's the tough thing, right? While on the one hand, you're trying to set up the epic moment, you don't want to, like, force it somewhere, right?
Absolutely. And I've been casting for 8 years. You know what I mean? I'm not even that green around the ears. So those moments even happen to, to people that have been doing it for quite a while because you just kind of wanted to be there. And yeah, like you also, like you can identify casters who are looking for the sound bites like a mile off. Like
sure.
You can see them and they occur at all levels of like experience and expertise.
Of course.
To be honest. Like, for example, a lot of my like pop-offs, I generally, like they're very risky because I don't know what I'm going to say. And like sometimes I completely fuck them up and then it does not make sense. But fortunately, those get buried because if I get one right, like if I say something properly, then it's fine. But a lot of the time, like I'm literally like I blank out. I'm like in a state of hypnosis. I like wake up on the floor like at the caster desk like 30 minutes later, like where was I? Like a lot of times those moments, it's very authentic, but it's also very, very difficult to control those kind of things. So like then you get moments like that grand final where like I got carried away with it, and that's the double-edged sword, I think, of also not having a lot of a filter, I think, between like what I'm actually thinking and sort of what I'm casting, outside of like obscuring swear words, which is something I can do. That's about it. So some of the shit I come up with is just ridiculous. And I said something, mate, I've said the weird, I've misquoted movies regularly.
Like what? Give me a really bad one. Give me like one where you think that isn't even the line. Why have I said that?
So, Merchant of Venice, right?
Yes.
I think for some reason I said like a guy was like, because obviously the Merchant of Venice is a bit of tragedy. Like the merchant kind of gets screwed over very much so. I implied that like one of the players was feeling like the Merchant of Venice in a positive way, like he was out there killing it because I got like
he got his pound of flag.
I got the concept. I've got the Merchant of Venice, which I obviously did study ages ago, mixed up with like a spice merchant who's just like making it rain.
Right.
And all of a sudden I have this reference that makes no sense, and everyone's like,
that's such a dark reference inadvertently as well.
Or like I think there was one ridiculous one where I routinely fuck up movie quotes. Like I think So like there's I think I was like I have the high ground quote like from I think from Luke and.
That was Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith or whatever, yeah.
So I completely misattributed who said what to who, I think, in that one. And then there was also one where I said like, Batman just walks up to the Avengers and playing that he was part of the Avengers.
Oh no! That's the right. Yeah, he's messed it up completely. Oh, that's the worst. That's inadvertently the worst of them all, because every comic book fan's going to go mental. And actually, you know what? As a random anecdote, right? When I was in college, which, by the way, for everyone who isn't from UK or Australia, that isn't actually university. It's like the years between school and university. When I used to go to college, right, because it's not as hardcore as university, you can sort of like still half stick around a lot of the time. So as a result, in UK, remember, drinking age is 18, you're in pubs and stuff, no one's checking your ID. So when we used to be in the pub, right, we used to love to play one of those quiz machines, and it was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And so obviously the sick thing about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, remember, is you get the 4 choices. You get you have like process of elimination. And dude, there was one that it would ask when you were near like one of the top prizes that literally, I actually was like, I would never do something like this. I'm not a violent person, but I was like so close to just like smashing this machine through the window, because the question was, what is the secret identity of Superman? And now you might imagine I pressed Clark Kent and it said, wrong, Bruce Wayne. And I literally was like, hold me back, like I'm gonna throw this fucking, because here's the problem with that Uber is, if you played the machine enough, it would repeat the questions eventually, because I only had like 200 questions. And I even told people, the problem with this is, I don't think as an authentic person I can allow myself to press Bruce Wayne even if the question comes up again. Like, even though I know I'll win, how can, like, isn't that like it's the most low level compromise? I'm trying to win like £1, like, that's like the analogy there. Like, it's like, what do I win from this? Oh, by the way, as an aside, what was I going to say on that one? What was the story you were telling before the movie part? What were we talking about?
About just being a double-edged sword, like that kind of casting, right? Like you sort of pass out, or like you don't realize what you've said, and so you could say just something. I think, Oh,
I remember now. It's actually from what Yiska was saying earlier, when you were saying about how it's worth going like 10 out of 10 on the big moment, because obviously when you do it at the time, I mean, listen, this is one of the downsides of esports, by the way. If you're a fan, if you imagine it'd be brilliant to become an esports caster, and what you're immediately doing is over glamorizing it and thinking it's way cooler than it is, whereas like it's like I always made this comment to Henry when I was in the CSGO green rooms. I said, Henry, have you noticed now, no matter how much day rate they pay us, when the chips are cold, when you come back after your game, when they were delivered half an hour ago, still just as shit, don't they? It still makes you want to, doesn't matter how much they're paying you. They can be paying you a king's ransom. You still got to complain about those fucking cold fries.
Or the pierogi in Poland. Yeah.
So anyway, one of the things about this is, right, when you're trying to go for that 10 out of 10 moment, obviously, at the time, if you're egotistical, you think, well, everything I say is going to be listened to and studied, and this is going to be really important. This is history. They're not. All they're going to remember is the sick moment. So actually, in a mad way, that must be tough, right? Because on the one hand, you don't want to force that as well, but you do know that even if parts of the rest of the cast have to suffer, if you get that iconic moment in that iconic game of that iconic player, mate, that can like add like 10% to your reputation. Like all the great casters, even when I mentioned the ones before, Anders, they all have like a classic like moment, like they all have a pop off. In fact, there was even one year in Counter-Strike, it was 2016, where even though James Bardolph and DDK were actually lowest on the totem pole of the 3 duos, they were the 3rd in the line, they just locked out and got all the sick moments. They got like Cold Zero jumping up, they got fucking simple 1 versus 2, they got Nico, like they got all the sick moments. Exactly. And by the way, as you can imagine, they can't say this, but I can just tell you that some of the other casting duos who then got the boring match after that was supposed to be the hype game, I could see it in their eyes. They were just like, what the fuck, man? That could have been mine.
How livid do you think I was when I cast the season of Shanghai shit in the bed and Wolf and Achilleos get their first win? Oh, and I said to him, I walked up to him. I said, I'm super pissed at you guys. It's not your fault, but I'm fucking so angry about the way the random number generator has fucked us over. And they were just like, it was like confetti and shit. It was like, I felt like a stage final. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh god, all of those Seoul versus Shanghai games.
That is like you got the jam jar lid almost off. They came in and just popped it off, and there you go, I did it.
What do? You know, what I mean, that is the way it crumbles. But I found like those moments as well. Like if you're looking for them, like you're less likely to find them. At least for me, like the more I try, the shitter I am at casting.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So like the Atlantic Showdown moment where I'm screaming at Unco to put his headset back on and keep playing. Like I didn't think of that. That was one of them blackout moments where. But there are like some fights, and this may be not a terrible segue, but there are some fights where you do want to like try and use all of like the voice techniques at your disposal to like
Right.
add gravitas as the fight goes. One thing, who was it that I really enjoyed? One thing Sem was unbelievably good at is actually not his volume or his pace, but the pitch of his voice. So he's actually got an extremely good range where you don't realize. And so obviously there was like, you can use your tone, volume, pitch, and pace, like all to add, you know, sort of, I guess, gravity to a certain moment. But he was just very, very good at sitting within this comfortable sort of volume or speed by just like pitching up.
Mate, his pitch goes so high at the end. Like when he screams like, oh my god! It's like it sounds like he's not even. It sounds like someone inside the back of his throat's talking or something. Like it gets so strange compared to his talking voice. You know, he can have like not a super deep voice, but he has a way deeper voice than that when he talks.
Yeah, and I just said I'm going to try that. I straight up stole that from him or tried to do it. But the problem, what you don't realize is, if you want to do that, if you want to change your pitch, you have to. Your diaphragm has to constantly get tighter and tighter as you cast, like over this fight. Like if you want to keep going higher, and you're already expelling a lot of air. So like if you try and do what Senwa does and like pitch up, halfway through the casting, you're probably out of air.
You're like the Brigitte that tried to smash through the Reinhardt shield, but it's bubbled already. You just left with nothing in no man's land.
I loved it because what I would do is like when he had this childlike glee that was so evident, right? It was very authentic, and for me, that's something I've always cared about a lot in casting. Again, it's the thing if you chase.
I think most of the best casters have that. If you notice, there's very few that are like cynical fucking showmen. Like, oh, I don't care the fuck about this game. Like people always used to say that at the end of CS:GO when they got sick of Semler. Basically, they used to go, "Oh, he's just phoning it in." It's like, dude, what's sick is that he actually somehow, after like X amount of years of doing this one game, he still is getting mad fired up by this moment. That's actually sick.
Yeah.
As he would say.
but his wick was burning in Counter-Strike, as we know.
Exactly. Yes. Mate, that's the thing. I guess, by the way, I'll just point out, in line with what I said in the intro of this show, you have also heard hundreds of games of the guy casting. It's going to be hard to change up every idiom and fucking every other word. You're going to go back over some of the same points, obviously.
Mate, I come out of a cast like, fuck, I can't use this word like for a while now. Like I kept saying unbelievable all the time, and that was like my go-to pop photo last year. And I'm like, yeah, that needs to stop. That's when it needs to become like unconscious and becomes conscious in those moments, like the hype moments where you have to like get in there, like open it up, take that word out of the lexicon and close it back up and hope that next time you just fucking lose control and, astral project your ass into the crowd that don't hit that word again. And if you do hit that word, like you have to go back and be more thoughtful about how you cast. So yeah, but so I love the pitch. Like my strength has generally usually been sort of in tone and pace. My pitch was never a strength for me when I was casting. Like, and I still struggle now to try and integrate it because I think it's really powerful. But I was just able to be really loud and really fast. But that got really old for me really quickly. Like started last year, I realized I wouldn't be able to make it if I just only lent on those vocal techniques as my methods for increasing the gravity of a moment. So that's when I really tried to use like pauses a lot more effectively. Started to try and build in some of the pitching stuff. One I think situation where like I was able to build that in well was in a match between Philadelphia and Boston. It was on Night Market on Lijiang Tower. Again, ironically, all my moments come from there. And it's when Carpe just like shits on 4 people with Widowmaker to win the round. And that was like a round where I felt like, I believed in Carpe. So I was able to like you said about Anders prior, is that I was able to like build up for each kill and then just authentically lose my shit at the end because I believed there was a chance of it. I was trying to build up the fight as it went. And then when it happened, I just lost my mind and it wasn't forced. It wasn't fabricated, and it was fine. Like I get this all the time. So many people say like Uber's hype seems so forced. I'm like, fuck off,
this
bro.
Is
like,
a
you
good
have no
topic,
idea who I am as a person. Like,
that's a good topic, by the way, because I can tell you from knowing a lot of casters, like here's the thing, right? It's actually the same with all my banter that I do on the desks. Like people don't know this. Very occasionally I'll think of something off stage and then remember it on stage. But I always tell people this, what they don't know is when you're on camera, the reason why other people actually get nervous is because when you have when you're on camera, you almost get that sensation, even if there's not a crowd, like people are watching me. And when you know that, you do feel a level of pressure that does mean that, for example, believe it or not, it can be hard to remember things. It can be hard to think up something cool that you would have said if you were just sat on a couch. Now, luckily, like, that's kind of my skill set. I was always good at remembering shit like that. But people don't know. If I do the banter then, it's because in that moment, something seems funny to me. And then hopefully I don't fuck up how I deliver it. And the problem is, though, when I got really good at delivering it, so I would always just slow down when I deliver the joke. Basically, so I don't, like, if I know what the joke is as I'm saying it, I just make sure I execute it. Because the worst thing with a joke is if you trip over a word, doesn't it? It just kind of ruins the moment. Well, the problem is, this is tying into what you said. The problem is, the better a job you do of making it seamless, the more it looks fake. The more to some people, they will think, he obviously thought that up before. Like, he had that whole line prepared. He told Machine to throw it to him, and then he delivered the, look at this smag bastard. It's like, dude, I know that most casters, in their greatest iconic moments, they are just actually reacting. It's just that, remember, they are professionals at doing exactly that. The Doa's most famous clip is obviously the Faker Z 1v1 with Ryu, right? Yeah. He didn't fucking think that up before. If they get into one of these, no, he just reacted. And obviously what made it wicked is somehow he just came up with like almost the perfect thing to say at the time. The moves, the fucking whatever. Like, sick.
Yeah.
But you can't premeditate it. Come on.
I get asked that probably. It's my most commonly asked question is like, did you think of this before the broadcast? I'm like, no, I got lucky and it came to me. And you remember it more than all the times I fucked up and just trail off and let Matt talk over me. Like, that's just the way it goes. Like, and everyone's like, like, everyone's saying stuff like Mitch never makes any mistakes, but he fucks up all the time. And I'm like, no, I never said that to you. I fuck up all the time, you shitheads. It's just, there's a narrative that's created that I'm just like this fucking perfect caster that doesn't make mistakes. And like, I do it literally every broadcast. People are like, you're fake, you're fabricating. I'm like, you don't even fucking know me. You have no idea who I am as a person. Like, you actually... Yeah. You don't know if I'm like this in real life, which I am. Like, spoilers, like I'm basically the same person I am as a caster in real life. Like, if you can do that, then you're in a good spot in your career. Not a lot of casters are able to do that, but if you just like talk to someone in real life as you would in a broadcast, then like you're gonna be feeling comfortable. You're gonna be able to access these jokes and stuff like that because you don't have to think through a filter so much, or you're not like having to think as a different person or character. You can just be yourself, and then like you can leverage the good qualities about you as a person, or or if you're funny or you've got good information recall, and you don't have to worry about anything getting in the way. So I get that.
I think it's also that people feel it's not genuine is probably also one of the shortcomings of how we, like, for instance, I think it would be great shoulder content, and I think that has also been proven already in CS, that just having like a caster cam in like the great moments, or in general, just like what's happening with bodies, like how people throw limbs around and whatever, and how people are actually really hyped. And of course, a lot of communication is just like the facial expression, like the body movement, and then also that sort of transports into the voice. You couldn't be genuine just sitting there going like to your Kalakesa, watch me give it to them, and like blink to them, and then just like go in. That I think it's like already that's like a communication, like scientific fact, that it has to be all in one thing, like the body movement, the facial muscles, that has to be there in order to produce these sounds. And
of course,
if we were to show that to the audience more, especially also in the Overwatch League, by the way, like when people say please show us player cams, no, also show us please caster cams during pre-show.
I think like one thing that was unfortunately lost to time, which I kind of hoped would be good to illustrate this, was during the Philly London final match. During my botching of the Prophet play, I was actually on my knees in front of the monitor, and it looked fucking weird because like it was. The caster tribune was not like elevated super high. It was just a flat platform with like a couple monitors on there. So I had someone take a photo of me, and I'm looking like I'm receiving the 7 sacraments or something like that while I'm casting, because I've obviously like seen something that has shocked me. I must have slipped or something like that, and I ended up on the floor, and I just stayed there, and I casted from there. You know what I mean? But again, despite me being clumsy and unable to stand on my own 2 feet, there's still a degree of authenticity there. And Matt freaked out. He looked at me like, "Why, you're on the ground?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it. Like, we just keep going." I didn't want to get up because I thought I missed something in that moment. So, and everyone's different about it. Like those big moments, Doa won't be bent over like bellowing. Like Doa will like have a ceiling, and that's also because Doa has also ripped his like vocal cords in the past.
Yeah.
He's very
all
careful.
those guys who've ever casted 5 days in a row in a week, like for weeks after weeks, like as far as I know, they all have a story where they go to the doctor and go, "I've got a really bad throat," and then he goes, "Yeah, you need to take 3 months off to let it heal." And they go, "My job is I can't do that," and then they just literally get told like, "Just try and take it easier." So what's mad is I think eventually, no matter how enthusiastic you are as a young guy coming up, you're going to hit that brick wall eventually. You can't just be a 10 out of 10 for 7 years in a row.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad that like we're casting 2 days a week right now, and it's 2 games a day.
Yes.
Because I spend so much time just trying to decompress from work because it's so invasive to your personal life. Like all the content I consume when I'm sitting at this PC is Overwatch related or esports related.
And there's too much even then. You can't get it all right.
Yeah. I mean, on the days off, my days off, Overwatch League's still on. Guess where I am? I'm there. Because if I miss, I'm sitting on the couch watching TV. Because if I miss those games, then it's just time I have to spend later on. So like I have to be 32 hours like locked in, like, or sometimes 40, but I have to be locked in, like no matter what. So to try to decompress or like get away from the job sometimes is you have to take a really concerted effort to do it. Otherwise you're just going to burn out. Just straight up, just going to lose it.
That's the craziest thing for me about Achilles, because he seems to be like where he goes with his voice. I always think like, okay, that can't be healthy.
He screams a lot, doesn't he? Yeah.
Like
it goes. My personal opinion is that he's in an area that's going to damage his voice, but he's younger.
He's only done it. I think he started maybe like off the top of my head. I think like 2016 maybe in terms of like going to Korea. So he hasn't done that many years actually. He's less than a lot of you guys.
Yeah, I casted with him for his first Overwatch cast actually. I am Gyeonggi, where he literally goes midway through the cast. He goes like he messes something up. He's like, "Oh, Mitch. Oh, Overwatch is really hard to cast, isn't it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it is, Seth. Let's just get on with the game." Like he completely. I always give him shit about it because it's so funny. Because where he is now, as opposed to then, because he shat the bed live at an IEM event. You know what I mean? The only IEM event that's ever there for Overwatch. So I always rib him about that nowadays when he starts holding his head up too high. But yeah, I was with him when he first started, and he. At one point I wondered if he was emulating me at all, like with his Overwatch casting, because his League and Overwatch casting were a little bit different. Like especially with Overwatch, how long these fights were and how frequently they were, he was sitting in the top of his range for a long time. But I think I realized that was just something that he felt compelled to do. It was just like his style. He bends over. He actually, when he casts, he puts his hands like on his thighs and he bends over like this, and he really like. He goes straight at the monitor when he casts. So it's like, it's very involved. Like he's like deep down there, really trying, but not the best way to project, by the way, though. That might also be an issue.
Yes.
If he's lacking projection, he's probably just like, but who knows? I mean, I don't
it's
know.
It's actually, by the way, I don't know if you're aware of this, but that's actually so you might know this. You know the band Oasis. Everyone knows Oasis, right? Noel Gallagher, Liam Gallagher from the 90s, right? Obviously, one of the famous things that made Oasis cool is that the reason Liam Gallagher's voice sounds really weird is because famously, when he stands at the mic, he like sort of bends his neck over and he refuses to like hold a mic or stand up and probably. But basically, because he comes from a working class background, his mentality is sort of like, fuck all that shit that you're all doing, kid. I fucking do it my way. Like he's trying to be like a rebel, and he's trying to be a punk. Well, the problem is, if you're a fan of his at all, in the modern day, you'll know this. His voice in the 90s, incredible. His voice now, he only just got it back to a half decent level, mate, because he literally wrecked his voice from that. He was literally, basically, he had like a throat that was bent in half, and he was basically singing as hard as he could out of it every song. So you can imagine what that does after like 10 years of those gigs. You can't, no one can last. Doesn't matter how much talent you started with, what a great voice you had. You can't handle that. It's like the equivalent of some guy, like if you were like a baseball pitcher, you can't just do like 1,000 throws in practice. That arm's going to be worn out in a few years, mate. Like you're going to have to figure out what the sweet spot is to stay at a high level, but not overdo it.
Yep.
And drink lots of tea, apparently, is the thing, right? It's like honey tea or some shit, isn't it?
Yeah. We always get that shit brought up to us at the booth, especially for the long days. Especially if it's like a 5-map series and both teams aren't particularly good. Like they're like the struggle days. There have been a few of those.
Plus, to be fair, I will say, in line with the Liam Gallagher example, it's also a lot easier, Matt. It's also a lot easier, Mitch, now that we're in a world where you get to live in the same place, you don't have to travel as much, you come in 2 days. When you're doing the event that's 5 days long, as a break, you're having a few drinks, you know.
Absolutely.
So if you're a different sort of person, maybe you're smoking a cigarette while you're doing it. Like, in line with the Liam Gallagher example, I don't know that it was only bending over like that. He was also doing other things. So, like, the problem is none of us knew how to take care of this shit, did we? We just thought it's just going to be there forever.
Yeah, I remember like I was very unwell like in my first couple of years in Cologne, like when I first started the esports thing and was doing these events. Like it was beer, Kirsch actually, I guess, and doner kebab like every day. Like,
there we go. The diet of champions.
the Joe Miller special, you know. Joe Miller would walk into the kebab store, right, and he'd be wobbling a little bit, had a few lemonades, and he'd go up there and he'd always tell this kebab owner, who by the way knew him. He'd tell the kebab shop owner that he had a wife, and then he had to get a kebab for her.
Right, so because he didn't know.
Yeah. Like knew he didn't have a wife, mate. Never had a wife. So like, like every time he'd be like, "Oh, here we go. Joe's going to ask me for." You know, even though he's had conversation with Joe while he's sober, and he knows Joe as well. Like,
sure.
Joe would walk in and be like, "Oh yeah, I need kebab from your wife as well." No worries. Get a message from Joe the next morning. I put a bloody kebab in my bed and I've rolled over it during the night, haven't I? Well, you took the wife thing way too far with
the kebab was his wife, apparently, so fucking hell.
Oh, mate. I'll never live those years again, and it's probably just as well because I won't survive them if I try and live like that again. That's just not happening. It's crazy.
Sure.
But
now,
actually,
yeah, go on. As we're starting to wrap up, so we've still got a little bit of time. I will say, by the way, because I want to give an example here for people, as the difference between when you do it artificially and when you do it organically. There is one person I am aware of who is a really good caster. In my opinion, he's the best, who does do artificial insertions. I made it sound like 10 times better than whatever he's doing, by the way, by saying it like fucking military guy from America in the X-Files or something there. When I just basically mean he crowbars it in. But the point is, it's sadicist. And what he does is, the whole point is he doesn't entirely crowbar it. Like what he actually does is, he will sometimes think up like a genius pun on a player's name, or he'll take like a passage from like a poem or something and think, right, well, if like these things were to happen, that would be so sick if I could hit these beats in this like famous line. And the reason why he's so good at doing it, that I actually don't think it's a bad thing to do in his specific case, I don't know if many other people could do it, is because I actually know from talking to him a lot. That's the point. He doesn't literally just wait for the first time that like Guardian's name is mentioned and then no matter what happens, try and awkwardly crowbar in something about Guardian and he looked after them or something. He doesn't do that. What he actually does is this is why it's fucking hard. He has to remember the line, and then if he has to wait 10 games for Guardian to do the move, he has to wait 10 games. And you know what? When Guardian does the move, he better fucking execute that, or it's all a waste of time, isn't it? So, that's like as I'm explaining it there. Hopefully, I've explained to the audience there that like that's not the same as just artificially ramming stuff in. Like, if anything, he's actually got like a mad skill set to be able to do that. I think it's insane.
I mean, that is something I try to do with varying degrees of success as well. Like, because I think about like I have very active imagination, so you will, as a caster, like you'll often think about these words, or like I literally the other night. This is crazy. I know I'm gonna share this. I was like half dozing off dreaming, and I was literally thinking up lines for my upcoming rap battle against Achilles. No one ever said anything that's ever going to happen. No one's like, but I thought in my head, I'm like, if there's ever a day where I have to rap him, like I'm thinking, like, I had the biggest one. It was like I don't know, like your flows are terrible, your lines are wonky, you're going to choke like it's I am Gyeonggi. Like I was there, I had everything that I needed. And then I wake up the next day, I'm like, holy shit, like no one ever said anything about that. It's not been on Reddit, nothing. But we always store those things away. And if you can, I've had situations where I've gone and said that line straight away at my first opportunity, and it's never been good. It's never worked out. So you need to think of it, and then
I'm sure you have mad buyer's remorse if you know you could have got a better moment when you deliver it and you think, "Fuck, actually that could have been better."
Like when I've blown this line, I realize I could have. Yeah, yes. I do it all the time actually, and it still happens now. So what you have to do, this is why it's not fake, by the way, because you need to rely on your body to subconsciously allow you to recall it in the moment that it actually happens. So you cannot actually take that line into a game. Maybe you can, maybe it works, but I doubt it. But you have to think about it, archive it. Go and cast, not bring it up straight away because you've sort of taken it out of your mind, and then hope it comes to you in that moment. And I've tried so often to like replicate the conditions on which I've had really good casts where those things can happen. And I'm like, did I have a Red Bull or did I not? Did I just drink or did I eat before I cast? And I was always trying to replicate that or capture the essence of those moments, but I haven't been able to do it yet. So if someone figures out how, let me know. You just have to hope that for whatever reason, your neurons will fire, and it'll come to your mind.
Yeah. I mean, that's very much comparable to writing, I find. Like, sometimes it's like you really don't find the flow of writing, and like these pieces, especially if you're like on a deadline or whatever, like it's really terrible to get out of you if you're not in that sort of, if you're not completely digging the story. And then when you're digging the story, it's like something takes your hand. And I personally feel dissociated from that when I really like a piece that I wrote.
If you go back and read a piece like a month later that you wrote, if you have a really good line, you even sort of read it like, fuck, who wrote that?
Yeah.
I don't remember coming up with a good line like that.
Yeah.
The fuck?
Yeah. Because it doesn't come to you from like you don't sit there and concentrate on trying to recall it or to drag it out there. Like something just, which is why like the subconscious is a crazy thing. And this is also why I feel more confident to not be overly rehearsed, and where I walk out there and actually trying to actively eliminate certain filters that I might apply because I'm in front of a camera or I'm in front of an audience or whatever. Yeah. So I'll try and identify those things that might actually prevent me from being any less than the pure distillation of Mitch. And I'll try and throw them out, and hopefully like I can sort of do, and like because there are days where you walk in where like, there's a chip on your shoulder, or I find it hardest where I feel like I have something to prove, or like I didn't have a good broadcast. Like if you internalize this and you walk out there like, oh, I've got to be good, oh, I've got to do better, because I'm really, really hard on myself because I expect to be literally the best. Like I have to be the best. There's no other way around it. So when I walk out there and I'm not, which is most of the time, it can hold you, that thought can hold you back. The more you try, the harder it is to do really well. So
I mean, I even do the same thing. So, for example, people might think when we're sitting backstage, if you're an analyst and you're watching the game, that you're like taking notes of what you're going to say. You're thinking, right, I'll say that about that round and that. Actually, what I learned after doing enough games was like, yeah, I did that in the beginning when I was like eager and I had all my fucking notes and I had every like stat written down. But what I learned over time was like, first of all, literally my life is watching this game every day. Like, it's not like I'm doing it like once a month and I have to really bone up on it like for an exam or something. And then secondly, when you've done it long enough, this is why like the thing you said about the subconscious is interesting, is you actually just get, that's where the confidence comes from, because you have this sense that it's like you've got the safety net. It's like, I'll think up something in the moment, like something good will come to me in the moment and make sense in the conversation we're having based on what's happening. And I even personally subscribe to the idea that like if there was like one cool fact but I would have forgotten it without notes, probably wasn't as cool as I thought it was. Like the cool stuff sticks, I think. It does kind of just naturally come out here. Because if you think about it, that's the part that's kind of weird about the fact that obviously we do as people on camera. You can blow your own ego up and think, I did all that shit. But it's like, in a mad sense, you don't. Because actually all you do is respond to the environment of what happened. And yeah, it's your weird idiosyncratic mind or whatever. But it's actually the event has to happen to spur what you said that was cool. It couldn't have come from a vacuum.
The more organic it is, the less you can be self-congratulatory, because the less you actually had to do with it. You know what I mean?
I think that is also, like, generally for creatives, it's like so important, especially if you have to, like, if you live up your impulsivity and like the things that come to you in the moment, just like feeding the good stuff into your subconscious. Like it's like it works on like on two ways. It's like you are what you eat, so you want your hardware, your body to sort of. You don't want to completely be wrecked when you are in these situations, but it's also you are what you read, I suppose. So,
well, mate, when Uber said that there, I immediately thought of something which is really bad. I've always like, here's the thing, right? I'm actually very good when I'm at CS:GO events, not reading tweets at those events. Like that's one of the few areas that I make myself not read them, because I know that there are people where when you read all the feedback and they criticize you on something, then it doesn't matter which way you go with it, you are going to be influenced by it. So, for example, if you decide, well, there's nothing wrong with that, I'm going to do it anyway. Now you're thinking that you're defying the people, or even worse, you try to like win the people back by doing what they asked. It's like you end up just like lost adrift in the stream of the fucking river or something. You just go nowhere, aren't you?
Yeah. Now imagine being a streamer and like your life relying on you having like,
of course, yeah,
the chat in your.
I'm gonna surf this fucking Twitch chat over here like an expert.
it's like self-imposed schizophrenia where like people are in your head just going like you're shit, man, you're very bad.
There are casters that do that, and I literally kick them out of the booth until they get rid of their phone. Like I won't
isn't
name
that mad
names.
when people have the chat open while they're casting? It's wild.
There are some casters who are like in like the Overwatch scene right now who I've casted with before that do it, and I despise it, and they still do it, and I just want to be like, I'll never cast with you, mate. You're fucking, you got some out Stockholm syndrome shit going on, mate. You just like you want people just to shit on you, and that's when if that was when your best work comes out, then I understand you as an individual. Like the fact that you're even cognizant of like a group of people out there just like hurling their absolute like banality into the void. If that's something that you want to like take stock in, then you're in the wrong job. But good luck to you.
No, you have to have two filters, like one for curse words and the other for Twitch emotes that you don't say them on broadcast.
God, I've done that once or twice. Yeah, I did like and like because Blizzard's really funny about the Pepe ones. Like I've done the Pepe ones before, and I've it was brought up with me. Yeah. But yeah, that's right. Like, and you talk about like what the content you consume, and I think like what I really try and do actually is outside of consuming esports content, I do try and consume to whatever degree I can withstand the nonsense of it, but pop culture. I do try and because I do want to understand like what the trends are like and what kind of humor or what references that will resonate with people. Like I can't do what Hex does and like reference a movie that was in the 1940s. You know, like some movie that was in.
Sounds like you should just stay away from movies generally, based on the things we've talked about today.
Yeah. Exactly. I can't do that, right? So, but I do need to like try and get an idea of like where, because I'd be great at isolating myself. If I wanted to, I could probably just like be really out of touch with people and just sit here and play video games or whatever. So, but I try and sort of get an understanding of where like people's psyche is right now, especially like. I'll be honest with you, like culture and politics are very closely linked as well, like all that shit. So like to a degree, I have to like immerse myself and try and understand where people are coming from, even if I disagree with 85% of it. Like you have to get this. So the more I can do that, the more that my beats can be a little bit more resonant with my audience, or at least like the way in which I frame things can be something that is more relatable. I think that's also really important to try and do. So I consume a lot of pop culture in that regard.
I think the best part is if you consume the culture and then you create culture and sort of like have like these catchphrases or like these things that then propagate through the scene where everyone knows like this is basically how you describe that. Not just only fun stuff, but also like describing concepts or whatever. But if they have some attachment to common culture, that just sticks better, I think.
Absolutely.
This video was supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, James Harding, NateDOhDoubleG, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, Travis Greb, Tristan Jones, Daniel Olivar, Jiangheng Lu, and special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion, one of my OGs. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question. I have a monthly AMA. Perhaps you want teasers for who the next guests are on my upcoming talk shows. Maybe you want to be part of my monthly discussion where my top patrons talk to me. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the description box link for Patreon.